Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari. Yasodanandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Banachari. Yamuna Tira Banachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajagacharya Stavtaras Satashi Maharaj's Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajagacharya Stavtaras Satashi Maharaj's Divine Grace. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Anantaguri Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shlahadadas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Govardha Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gaur Gopinath Shyamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. Brihat Madanga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature, we're up to text 22. Yeah. Jñānena dṛṣṭa-tattvena. Jñānena dṛṣṭa-tattvena. Vairāgyeṇa balīyasā. Vairāgyeṇa balīyasā. Tapo-yuktena Yogena. Tapo-yuktena Yogena. tīvreṇātma-samādhinā. tīvreṇātma-samādhinā. Jñānena dṛṣṭa-tattvena. Vairāgyeṇa balīyasā. Tapo-yuktena Yogena. tīvreṇātma-samādhinā. Others? Vaishnavis? Okay. Jñānena, in knowledge. dṛṣṭa-tattvena, with vision of the absolute truth. Where was that? Vairāgyeṇa, with renunciation. Balīyasā, very strong. Tapo-yuktena, by engagement in austerity. Yogena, by mystic yoga. Tīvreṇa, firmly fixed. ātma-samādhinā, by self-absorption. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. This devotional service has to be performed strongly in perfect knowledge and with transcendental vision. One must be strongly renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. Purport. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or mental concoction. It is specifically mentioned here that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge by visualizing the absolute truth. We can understand about the absolute truth by evolving transcendental knowledge, and the result of such transcendental knowledge will be manifested by renunciation. That renunciation is not temporary or artificial, but is very strong. It is said that development of Krishna consciousness is exhibited by proportionate material detachment, or vairāgya. If one does not separate himself from material enjoyment, it is to be understood that he is not advancing in Krishna consciousness. Renunciation in Krishna consciousness is so strong that it cannot be deviated by any attractive illusion. One has to perform devotional service in full tapasya, austerity. One should fast on the two Ekādaśī days, which fall on the 11th day of the waxing and waning moon, and on the birthdays of Lord Kṛṣṇa, Lord Rāma and Caitanya Mahāprabhu. There are many such fasting days. Yogena means by controlling the senses and mind. Yoga indriya-saṁyamaḥ. Yogena implies that one is seriously absorbed in the self and is able, by development of knowledge, to understand his constitutional position in relationship with the Superself. In this way, one becomes fixed in devotional service, and his faith cannot be shaken by any material allurement. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupakaramayam Dadati Swaparantikam. So this is not a long purport, and I'm going to sort of work through it. I'm going to start at the beginning and just kind of start with the translation and just bring up points as they occur to me. So this devotional service has to be performed strongly in perfect knowledge with transcendental vision. One must be strongly renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. So I found it interesting that Prabhupada used the word strongly there in that translation twice. If you read it with just omitting that word, it reads the same. Just devotional service has to be performed in perfect knowledge with transcendental vision. One must be renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. It's the same. The meaning hasn't changed, but Prabhupada, for some reason, he added the word strongly twice, so to give it some special emphasis. Another interesting thing I found in the translation, Prabhupada mentions about one must perform mystic yoga, but of all the points in the translation, in the purport, he comments on all the other points, but he doesn't comment on that point. So I might say something about that if I have enough time towards the end. He doesn't comment on that point. Now getting into the purport here, it says, Prabhupada says, devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or mental concoction. So what came to my mind when I read that was that sometimes we see, when we're having our class here, guests come in and they'll come in and they just kind of wander behind the speaker, and they wander up and they, go offer some pranams or something in front of the deities, and then they just keep going and they leave, And whenever I see that happen, I think to myself, okay, hey, wait, don't stay, just don't go, just stay, sit down. In other words, they're obviously have some sentiment, for devotional service, otherwise why are they coming to the temple? But unfortunately, they haven't understood it's a process. It's a good sentiment, it's nice, but that would be, I think Prabhupada's referring to materially, emotional, mental concoction. They got some idea in their head about what it means to, be a devotee or be spiritual. So you got to kick that out, or you got to get past that. Devotional service is Prabhupada would refer to as a science, an art. There's things you got to learn. There's certain things you got to do. Just like, my service is distributing books. So sometimes somebody wants to come out and they want to distribute books. They have some sentiment that, oh yeah, book distribution, yeah. And they'll come out and they have some romantic idea in their head about how it's all done. And they'll, so they'll start, and when they start approaching people, they realize, whoa, hey, this isn't happening. It's not working. It's not working like I thought it was gonna. And if they're unfortunate, they just get frustrated and discouraged and they give up. And if they're a little bit more fortunate, they get humble and they come to me and say, hey, well, how do you do this anyway? See, there's a process. There's sales, there's technique, there's procedure, and if you got to know how to do that, just like in dressing the deities. You can't just go, I don't know anything about dressing the deities, but I would imagine that you can't just go up there and ab lib. You got to, there's certain things you got to know how to do. I know for cooking and offering that's the case. Managing a temple, I'm sure that's the case. There's skills involved. Now the way you learn those is you have to be humble, and you have to approach somebody, and this is our process. You have to approach somebody who knows how to do it, and be humble and learn from that person. We hear repeatedly in purports and Prabhupada's classes, he's always quoting that from the Brahma Samhita, Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto, that Krishna consciousness is not academic. It's not, you don't learn it by studying the Vedas, although that's good. We should study the Vedas, not like we shouldn't study the Vedas. And I think Prabhupada himself made this point in yesterday's class, that it's necessary but not sufficient. You got to go beyond that. You got to actually, take shelter of a person, a devotee, and please that person. Prabhupada used sometimes in some places use the word apprentice. That's a good understanding. You have to be prepared to become an apprentice to somebody who knows what you want to know. And you serve them, and as Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 34, about like a menial servant. And by doing that, that person becomes pleased. He becomes pleased with your service attitude, and he becomes inclined to instruct you. And in addition to instructing you, that person will encourage you. This is how it works. I've experienced this, like when people come out and be on book distribution. If somebody's like, really humble and they're trying to really help, me with different things, you develop affection for that person, appreciation and affection. So you're prepared to take the time, because it takes time and energy to kind of teach somebody something. You got to tell them, and you got to get over it, and then you got to, they make a mistake, you got to correct them. It's teaching is work, So the person you have to feel, if that person has a submissive, humble service attitude, if they're prepared to render menial service like that, you feel inclined to do that. And not only do you teach them, but you encourage them. If they're finding it hard, you kind of, it's all part of the thing. For them to be successful, they need that. They need the instruction, they need the encouragement, they need the opportunities. Sometimes I'll even go as far as I'll see somebody, coming that I could see, this person looks like somebody could take a lot of books and give a good donation. And I might let my partner have that person, I'll let the other person, because I know this will be, they'll probably do, get a good sale here. So it's like that in devotional service. It's like that in devotional service. Prabhupada, as I said, he's always saying that Krishna is the property of the devotee. The devotee can just, there's that, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, there's that song, Krishna Diti Par, how's it go? Krishna say Tomar, Krishna Diti Par, Tava Pachas. I can't remember the Bengali, but Krishna's is yours. You can just give them to somebody. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying like that. And Prabhupada would repeatedly make that point. So that's a very important point that, people need to, myself included, this is how you learn. This is how it happens in Krishna consciousness. You got to try to be humble, and if somebody knows something that you want to know how to learn or do, you got to become, humble and menial servant to that person, and then upadekshanti te jnanam jñānenas tattva-darshina. The self-realized soul, with the cooperation of Krishna within their heart, will impart knowledge unto you, because they have that. So that's that point there about devotional service cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or material concoction. I mean, it can be, but you won't get anywhere. or you certainly won't progress the same way as you would if you would do what I just was describing. So going on, it says, it's specifically mentioned here that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge by visualizing the absolute truth. We can understand about the absolute truth by evolving transcendental knowledge. So I think the way that, what does Prabhupada mean by evolving transcendental knowledge? Well, first of all, what does he mean by visualizing the absolute truth? I think he means more than just trying to have a picture of Krishna in your mind. I think it's, appreciating the entire worldview, the entire picture of reality that's being presented, within the Vedic literatures. And the way you evolve transcendental knowledge is by applying it. When you apply the knowledge that you're receiving in, in the books here from the spiritual master, then it evolves. In other words, you start understanding it more. You get realization. And the Krishna himself states that in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. To those who are constantly devoted, worship me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. I'm dwelling within their heart, I destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So your transcendental knowledge evolves as a result of accepting, at least initially having, provisional faith in the knowledge that we're receiving, and then being prepared to put it into practice, apply it in your life, and then that transcendental knowledge evolves. And because as a result of such transcendental knowledge, knowledge will be manifested by renunciation. That renunciation is not temporary or artificial, but it is very strong. Again, strong. Prabhupada's really emphasizing. It says, it is said that the development of Krishna consciousness is exhibited by proportionate material detachment, or vairāgya. So there were two verses that came to my mind when I read that sentence. One is Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Jnaniyati Ashu Vairāgyam Jnanam Chad Hoitakam. That by engaging in devotional service, one automatically develops causeless knowledge and detachment. And of course, there's that very famous verse from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, text 42, Bhakti Padashanu Bhavo Viraktir, which I don't know the rest of it, but it describes the same thing, how by engaging in devotional service, you become detached. And Prabhupada says, if one does not separate himself from material enjoyment, it is to be understood that he is not advancing in Krishna consciousness. So that's kind of like a litmus test, we can use that. Sometimes Prabhupada would say, he'd make the point, if you're eating and you don't have to ask somebody, is my hunger now being satisfied? It's self-evident. So in the same way, we can judge how we're doing by how much we're separating ourselves from material enjoyment. And just a couple of thoughts on that I had. One thing is that, what was the point I was going to make? You got to work at that. It doesn't happen by itself, and it doesn't go away. Say we think, okay, yeah, I know I got to sooner or later become detached from material enjoyment, but I'll get around to that later on, or maybe it'll just happen automatically. Neither one. It doesn't just happen, It's true that if you engage seriously in devotional service, we just heard that, but it seems like simultaneously you got to work at it, and it doesn't go away. It's something that we have to kind of, make a conscious effort to do. That's my experience. It's a thought. Okay, so Prabhupada goes, renunciation in Krishna consciousness is so strong that it cannot be deviated by any attractive illusion. And then I thought of two examples of that, the two topmost examples of that I could think of. One was Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was so much absorbed in devotional service, specifically chanting, He'd chant that phenomenal number of rounds every day, 192 rounds a day, which is like I said, phenomenal. It's incredible. He must have been chanting for, more than 15 hours a day, probably moving closer to, I think I heard on one lecture, Prabhupada, he kind of did the math, and he said something like 16, 17 hours a day, for him to be able to do that, chanting it like 5 minutes around approximately. But anyway, but it wasn't that he was just a mechanical thing. He was getting a lot of taste and a lot of realization, so much so that Maya Devi herself came and tried to seduce Haridas Thakur, and she was unsuccessful. What to speak of some beautiful young girl that Ramachandra Khan, I believe his name was, had set up to go deviate Haridas Thakur. He couldn't do it. They were both unsuccessful. What to speak of her? Maya Devi herself was unsuccessful, and I think she actually became Haridas Thakur's disciple, right? She asked for initiation into the holy name, and so he's like probably the topmost example of that, of how you cannot be somebody who's a Krishna conscious is somebody who's really strong in Krishna conscious. They can't be deviated by any attractive illusion. Another example, a really good example of that would be Raghunath Das Goswami. By the way, there's so many examples of this point. These are the two that just came to my mind. Raghunath Das Goswami was, in a very wealthy family, and he was very good looking, and he had his parents had arranged, he had a beautiful wife, and he had opulences like King Indra. Actually, there's one exchange between his mother and his father. His mother, because he kept running away. He kept running away to try to get the association of Lord Chaitanya and the devotees and Lord Nityananda, and they kept, his father would send out men and they'd capture him and they'd bring him back. And at one point his mother said to his father, "Why don't you just chain him up?" And she said, and the father said to the mother, "You foolish woman, he has opulences like King Indra. He's got a wife that's, so beautiful, like the heavenly, I can't remember what he compared it to. But he said, if that doesn't, capture his mind, what are these chains going to do, So he was, but he got the mercy. He got the mercy of Lord Nityananda and Haridas. Actually, I think he got the mercy of Haridas Thakur as well. I can't remember the pastime now exactly, but he had taste. And because he had that taste for devotional service, despite the fact that he had all sorts of attractive things, he could have fallen into illusion very easily, but no, because he was so absorbed in devotional service that he was able to not be deviated by any attractive illusion. And as I said, there's many, many more examples of this, I'm sure. Prabhupada goes on to say, one has to perform devotional service in full tapasya, austerity. One should fast on the 2 Ekādaśī days, which fall on the 11th day of the waxing and waning moon, and on the birthdays of Lord Kṛṣṇa, Lord Rāma and Caitanya Mahāprabhu. There are many such fasting days. So, thought that came to my mind. On Ekādaśī, we just, we don't eat grains and beans. But I remember I've heard at least one lecture where Prabhupada was saying on Ekādaśī, he said that, he's making the point that, serious devotees, they don't even drink water sometimes on Ekādaśī. He said, but we can't do that, so we just have it, so a little fruit, little milk, like that. At least from that lecture, it seemed like Prabhupada was kind of suggesting that Ekādaśī should be more than just not eating grains and beans, but anyway, one thought came to my mind about this, that because sometimes the standard that we practice in ISKCON seems to be different from the standard that Prabhupada's suggesting in the book. The feeling you get from the purport. And one thought I had about that was that these books are having to present like the ideal standard. There's one conversation, or Ramaswara Prabhu, he was the only one there, but he claims he heard Prabhupada say that these books are the law books for the next 10,000 years. Some devotees don't accept that because he was the only one there, but as Prabhupada in the books he's presenting the ideal standard, and maybe in ISKCON, he made some adjustment because we were all very young, neophyte like that, so he relaxed the standards a little bit, but the books are kind of presenting that ideal standard as opposed to, like a basic minimum requirement. Just a thought on that. Okay. So it goes on. There are many. Okay. Yogena means by controlling the senses and mind. Yoga indriya-saṁyamaḥ. Yogena implies that one is seriously absorbed in the self and is able by development of knowledge to understand his constitutional position in relationship with the Superself. In this way, one becomes fixed in devotional service and his faith cannot be shaken by any material allurement. So it's both in the translation and here in the purport, it's what do you call it? Not a capital S, it's a small s. So it's referring to, when it says being fixed in self-absorption, it's not, I think it's being referred, what's kind of, the point that's being made there is you have to understand you're not the body, right? But you also have to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship. That's what the sentence here says, one has to understand his constitutional position in relationship with the super self, and that's a capital S. So we have to, understand that we're not this body, and we also have to understand that Krishna is, as the super soul, is within our heart, and etc. So both things. Okay, now I mentioned at the beginning that there's one point in the translation that Prabhupada didn't at all touch upon in the purport. It says, which is that and perform mystic yoga. So I found that a little curious. Why Prabhupada kind of commented on every other part of the translation, but not that. And the thought I had about that was this, that especially, actually, we're coming to a chapter called Lord Kapila Explains Devotional Service. And we're just about 1 week away from that. And in the purport to the first text of that next chapter, Prabhupada says, he makes the statement, Ashtanga Yoga is part of Vaishnava practice because its ultimate goal is realization of Vishnu. See? So, he's acknowledging there in that purport. And elsewhere, further on in that chapter, he also makes the point, he says, it is recommended in the yoga scripture that one should put the soles of one's feet between the two thighs and ankles and sit straight. That posture will help one concentrate his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This process is also recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. So notice there's a couple different places where Prabhupada is acknowledging that the importance of this Ashtanga Yoga. So why is it that he didn't comment upon it all in today's it was in today's translation, but there's no elaboration upon that in the purport. And I'd like to suggest the reason for that is this, that one, I just read you that sentence from the purport of the first text. It says, Ashtanga Yoga is therefore part of Vaishnava practice because its ultimate goal is realization of Vishnu. Well, they don't understand that. People who are practicing Ashtanga Yoga today generally do not understand that the ultimate goal of realization is Vishnu. And aside from that, there's another. There's another paragraph or purport where Prabhupada says, yoga practices in general and hatha yoga in particular are not ends in themselves. They are means to the end of attaining steadiness. They don't understand that either. They're doing these things and they think they're an end in themselves. They don't understand that they're just a means to an end. So in general, Prabhupada just felt like he didn't want devotees to get distracted or deviated, which is easy for them to do. I remember when I was, everybody knows that famous story about when Prabhupada was walking down Juhu Beach and with some devotees on a morning walk, and the devotees saw some guys standing on their head on the beach, and they said to Prabhupada, look at the mudhas standing on their head. And Prabhupada said, he looked over, and they were expecting Prabhupada to go, yeah, they're such mudhas, wasting their time like that. And to their surprise, Prabhupada went, no, that is not foolish. That is sirasana. That is good for one's health. And they were kind of like stunned and quiet, and they kept walking. And then it was towards the end of the walk, and Prabhupada got to the car, and just before he was getting into the car, the devotees asked Prabhupada, so should we do that? And Prabhupada, there was another silence there. And Prabhupada, they opened the door of the car for him. Prabhupada turned around before he was going to hop in, turned around and he said, "Not required." Threw his cheddar over his shoulder and turned around and hopped in the car, and off he went. And apparently there was some more discussion about the same subject in the car, but I can't remember what it was. Somebody told me once, but I forgot. But, he had a chance. He could have said, "Well, yeah, it's okay, it's a good idea," but no. There's a reason why he said like that. He didn't, no, not required. And I'll explain by another story why I think Prabhupada did like that. I joined in 73 in Brooklyn, okay? And I remember shortly after I joined, one day, a devotee brought a case of 7-Up into the temple, not into the temple room, but into the temple, and right outside, actually he plunked it down right outside the temple room, and devotees, "Well, what's this?" And says, "It's 7-Up. Everybody can have it. They want." Prabhupada drinks it on the airplane. And devotee, "Oh, really? Okay." And everybody was, grabbing 7-Up, whether they were thirsty or not, and they were drinking the 7-Up. And were you there? Do you remember that, Archita, or not? Yeah, okay. Yeah, everybody was drinking 7-Up, and for about I guess maybe like a week, that was it. That was the thing to do, drink 7-Up. And then apparently word got back to Prabhupada that Prabhupada, some devotee thought this is a bit weird, and so got back to Prabhupada that devotees were drinking 7-Up left, right, and center, and Prabhupada said, "What is this nonsense? That is sense gratification." He said, "Tell them stop it. I drink 7-Up because I'm an old man and it has a little lemon juice in it or something that helps me with my digestion. But they're just doing it for sense gratification. Tell them to stop." See? So Prabhupada could understand, the devotees didn't have a lot of, weren't particularly mature, didn't have a lot of discrimination, and they could get easily carried away and focusing, too much time on just the body and so forth and so on. So that's why I think Prabhupada, despite the fact that it says here in the translation, one must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga. Prabhupada doesn't elaborate upon it in the purport because he didn't want to encourage devotees in doing that. Actually, here's another purport here where Prabhupada goes, "The Hatha Yoga system and the breathing system is especially recommended for those who are very absorbed in the concept of bodily existence. But one can perform the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna and can fix the mind more easily." Prabhupada was always emphasizing that not necessary. It's more easy to form Hatha Yoga, to form Bhakti Yoga. And elsewhere he says, "Practicing this yoga system of exercise and breath control is very difficult for a person in this age. And therefore Lord Chaitanya recommended Kirtaniya Sadahari." So, it's not like it's bogus, it's worthless, but it's got its place. I'll give you an example of, just from my own experience. About 30 years ago, I came back from New Zealand, and I moved back here to the United States. So before I came to the temple here, I was living with my parents down in Laguna Beach, and I had a son. I had to take him to school, so I had to get a car. So I was going around, trying to buy a used car, and so there's this one guy. He had this used car. It was like 1 or 2 years old, and it was, had very low mileage, and he was way below the Kelly Blue Book price for the thing. I went out and had a look at it. If I remember, I think he even allowed me to take it to a mechanic, and so I thought, wow, this is much better than all these other cars I was looking at. They're always practically all the other ones. I took into a mechanic, and the mechanic would point out, well, look, it's got an oil leak there, and there's something here, and there's this noise. This one was kind of, wow, it was like perfect. But so then I came back, and the guy, I was kind of, wanting to get it. And he said, the guy said, there's one thing, this is my wife's car, actually, and I'm selling it on behalf of her. I don't have the title with me. I've got the registration, I've got all the insurance, proof of insurance here, and all the, the service. He showed me all the service records, all the oil changes and this and that, but he didn't have the title. So I rang my father, and I said, what do you think? This car is perfect. It's really low mileage. It's practically new. It runs great. I took it to the mechanic. They said it was good. Just one problem: he doesn't have the title. He said he'll give me the title, and as soon as he gets it from his wife. My father said, "Don't touch it. Don't touch it." And I said, he said, "Once you give him the money, that's it. He has no obligation to return the money, and you might not get the title." So sure enough, I did what my father said, and I didn't give him, didn't buy it. And we did some research afterwards, and the guy was going through a divorce, and he was trying to steal his wife's car and sell it. Basically, he wasn't the owner. He was trying to sell me a car that he didn't own. Basically, that was what was going on. So, but the thing was this, that if I would have bought that car, okay, and I would have started driving it around, it's not like it wouldn't drive. You see, it would, it was a good car, but I'd have a problem sooner or later. I'd have a problem if I got pulled over for some reason by cops, or when I had to renew the registration, there would have been a problem further down the line. So the same thing. This yoga system, Ashtanga yoga system, it works, but because they don't have knowledge of that, the goal is Vishnu, and that, what else? They don't have knowledge that the goal is Vishnu, they don't have a knowledge that these exercises are means to an end, it's a problem. People engage in that, it does work, but because they don't understand it in the proper perspective, it's problem. It can be problematic, you see? That's the thing. But it actually does, there's benefit there if you understand that, if you understand the whole thing in its proper perspective. If you understand that it's those yoga asanas are a means to an end, the goal is Vishnu, etc., then you can use it to a certain extent to your benefit. Because Prabhupada does say, I did read that one purport where Prabhupada says, he talks about swasti asana and how, if you can sit like that, it helps you concentrate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I've personally experienced that. So it can be beneficial, but at the same time, it's very easy to get kind of carried away with the whole thing and, get distracted and deviated, so you have to know what you're doing. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any question? Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned how hatha yoga is simply a waste of time. And what about devotees that lift weights or go for walks or do calisthenics? They should just give that up also? And
yeah, I think it's okay, but you have to, you have to do it in the right way. I mean, what's the phrase I'm looking for? You have to keep things in the right perspective. And like Prabhupada himself did some things. Everybody knows that story about when, Prabhupada had the stroke, and I think it was 67, and it was Memorial Day weekend, and they were trying to get a doctor, and it was very hard because everybody goes on holiday Memorial Day weekend, but they did find this one old German guy that was a doctor, and he came and saw Prabhupada, and, he spent some time with Prabhupada at 26 2nd Avenue, that's where they were staying. And then when the doctor left, the devotees followed him out, and they said, so what do you think, And the doctor said, I think the old man, he's indoors too much, he prays too much, he needs to get outside, he needs to go for a walk. And the devotees weren't very impressed by that, diagnosis. So they went back in the room, and Prabhupada said, so what did he say? And Brahmananda said, Prabhupada, this is an old doctor, he's not a very good doctor. And Prabhupada, no, what did he say? So Prabhupada said, he thinks you need to get outside and take a walk and, get some exercise. And Prabhupada said, no, he has spoken right, he has spoken correctly, And that's when Prabhupada started that program. So Prabhupada walked every opportunity he got. Every morning he walked until he couldn't do it anymore. Prabhupada took 2 massages. He took a very vigorous massage before lunch, and then he had another massage in the evening, just before he would go to bed, sleep. And they combined with like 2 hours, and the morning walk was an hour, and Prabhupada was kind of careful about his diet. He would eat at a certain time, and the ginger root had to be there. So, Prabhupada did things for his health. He did do things for his health. He didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about it in Bhagavatam class or encourage other devotees to do it, but he did do things for his health. I remember hearing one anecdote where, I think from Vaisheshika, he said, one time Prabhupada was in his room, and a devotee came in, it was a brahmachari, and Prabhupada got out from behind his low desk, and he did a push-up. And he said, every brahmachari should do 20 push-ups a day. I heard that, And so Prabhupada was, he understood health was something you had to do something about, but he didn't make a big deal out of it, because he didn't want, once again, I think he didn't want devotees to, he didn't want like a Hatha Yoga society or, he didn't want that to enter into Krishna consciousness very much. He was, just like when Prabhupada was in Sydney, after he installed Radha Gopinath, he said, I'm leaving you at the Malechas. I can't be responsible. Please train them up, to worship you nicely. See, so there was things that, so in the same way, Prabhupada, there was things he just had to leave up to Krishna to give us the intelligence to navigate and, figure out. He couldn't be responsible for every little detail of life at that point. That's the way I would respond to that. Answer your question.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? Oh, Archita Prabhu, yeah. Thank you.
That last sentence of the translation that you were emphasizing, that Prabhupada didn't include in his purport. But if you look at the sentence, it says, one must be strongly renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. In other words, if you can be firmly fixed in self-absorption by some other process like chanting Hare Krishna intensely, then you don't have to do that. See, so it's the end that's really important. And as you've stated over and over again, Prabhupada said you can achieve that end by seriously engaging in this bhakti yoga process.
Yeah.
So, and who is saying this? This statement, this translation, this statement is made by Kapila Dev in a different yuga, where people were capable of doing this, of performing mystic yoga properly. That was what Kardama Muni was doing when he married Devahuti. And now he's speaking to Devahuti, so of course he's going to emphasize that, because that was the process in that age, and people could do it. But in this age, we're not capable. That's why Prabhupada doesn't even touch on it. We're not capable of properly performing Ashtanga Yoga. Even if we know that the goal is Vishnu. Even if you say, yeah, I know the goal of Ashtanga Yoga is Vishnu, can you go somewhere and properly perform Ashtanga Yoga? Yam, Niyama, Asana, all nine of, no, we can't. So Prabhupada doesn't touch it.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.